Every guest on our show has something important to contribute, but today's guests take that to a whole different level. Through years of working with children and educating the people who will teach young children, they've learned a thing or two about what makes little kids tick. Together, they are the authors of several books, one on how young children learn and the others on how to enhance children's learning through giving them lots of time for open-ended play. I'm going to do this a little bit differently today because I want you to identify which voice goes with which guest. So, one of my guests is a professor of early childhood education at Folsom Lake College in Folsom, California, and comes to the mic today with more than 30 years' experience as an early childhood teacher, director, and educator. She was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and grew up in Colorado. And among the items on her bucket list is to visit every national park in the country and also to hike the John Muir Trail. Please welcome Lisa Daly.
Well, good afternoon, Karen. I'm delighted to be here with you and your audience this afternoon.
It's really, really good to hear your voice. So everybody, that's Lisa's voice. And my other guest today is a professor of early childhood education at Cosumnes River College in Sacramento, California, and brings to the mic her expertise in advising and guiding students, something she's done for more than 25 years. She was born and raised in Mexico, relocated to the States at age 21, and shares my desire to visit Reggio Emilia, Italy, for reasons which I'm sure we'll get into during our conversation today. Please welcome Miriam Beloglovsky. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you, Karen. This is very exciting.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Personally, this is like exactly my wheelhouse, so I am so excited, and it's good to hear. I can hear the excitement in your voices as well. So, Lisa, what is the John Muir Trail, and why do you want to hike that one specifically? This really resonated with me when I found out that you're a hiker as well.
I just have a passion for the outdoors. I love to be in nature. There's a spirituality and just a wholeness, a completeness when you're in nature and the beauty. And I just would like to hike the Sierras and just go through the trail and start. And we live next to a state park in Sacramento, and I hike around the lake at the state park every day, and just absolutely like to be out in nature and do that hiking. It just rejuvenates me and refuels me and clears my mind and just gives me a sense of centeredness when I'm out there.
I love it. I love it. I didn't grow up in Colorado, but my parents moved to Colorado about 20 years ago, and they lived in Breckenridge for quite a few years, and now they live in Silverthorne, which is still in Summit County. And I'm wondering, did you grow up anywhere around there or someplace different in Colorado?
I grew up in Inglewood, which is a suburb of Denver.
Yep, I've heard of it.
And went to the University of Northern Colorado, which is in Greeley. Mm-hmm. And my whole family now lives in West Cliff, Colorado, which is somewhat southwestern Colorado. It's between the Sangre de Cristo and the Wet Mountain Range at about 8,000 feet. So wow. I still get back there to visit them every now and then.
So you come by your love of hiking very honestly. Mm-hmm. So, Miriam, what in the early childhood education world would make us both want to visit Reggio Emilia, Italy?
I think the schools of Reggio Emilia really understand who children are, and they have a very positive image of their ability and capacities. And for me, that's a piece, and the other one is the artistic and aesthetic values that they incorporate.
And they have, so I learned when I was now this is a while ago, when I was in graduate school, it was it was close to 20 years ago now. I learned about, I took a whole semester in different curriculum models, and one of them was called the Reggio Emilia model. And the schools there are really different from a lot of other schools, certainly in Italy, but also over the country. And they've really become a model for some really great ideas and ideals when we're talking about educating young children. Can either of you talk about those a little bit? What's different about the Reggio Emilia model specifically?
Well, the school started by Loris Malaguzzi during the Second World War as a way to help families who were working or people that were going to war have a place for their children. So it's very community-based.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of interest from the community and a lot of support from the community. They have a very holistic image of children as a protagonist of their own knowledge. And they also have found a wonderful way to document their learning, as well as incorporating the arts that come from the community and increasing children's way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And a lot of parent involvement, a lot like the parents they're in the school all the time, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct.
Yeah, which is, I hope we'll get into this a little bit more, but I think that the idea of that can be very daunting to parents who are already really, really busy. But the benefits of that, at least in Reggio Emilia, are kind of amazing. So I do hope we can get back to that a little bit. Something that I heard all the time as a preschool teacher, and you guys may. And so first of all, can I just apologize for keeping saying you guys? It's a bad habit that I've gotten into, and when I'm addressing two people, it's easy to say that, and I'm going to work hard not to anymore. But anyway, something that I heard all the time as a preschool teacher was, they're so little. What difference can the stuff they're doing now possibly make, like, later on in their lives? After all, they'll never remember it. And to me, this always felt so diminishing, both for the teachers of the young kids and for the children themselves. And I'm wondering, have you ever heard this kind of argument, and how would you address it if a parent were to say to you, what's the point of, helping them learn stuff now? They're going to forget it anyway.
Well, I just want to say that it actually starts in utero.
Yeah.
And everything is about relationships and building relationships and a sense of belonging and a sense of trust. And we start academic learning from relationships. And so all learning comes from children feeling safe and secure enough so that they can go out and explore and investigate and do problem solving. But they have to have experiences in order for concepts to make sense for them later on in life. One of our dear friends and mentor was Bev Boz, and she always talked about life being like having coat hooks, and that in order to really understand something, the coat hook is what you can hang information on. And so you have to have that solid base. If the coat hook wasn't there, the coat would just fall to the ground. And so that's the way it is with learning too. In order for children to make sense of things later and to know how to read and how to write, they need to know what they're reading about. And so they need to know when something is sticky or slippery, or when they get to science concepts later on, they have to know about gravity and about physics and about velocity and about force. And so it's through, building with blocks and constructing and doing ramps that they're going to learn all future concepts. And I know lately we've been talking to some high school physics teachers, and they are discouraged and having a hard time because they're seeing a group of adolescents coming into high school who have not played and tinkered as children. And as a result, they really are not understanding any of the physics concepts at all. And so they're bringing play into the high school classrooms for them to tinker so that they can actually see, how things work and how they operate. And we were talking to a friend who was saying that young engineers were coming into this university and they had scored a perfect score on their math SATs, if you can believe that.
That's quite an achievement.
They didn't know how to handle a screwdriver. They didn't know how a screwdriver operated.
Wow.
And so everything a child does now is the foundation and the basis for all future learning.
It's making me think of, I don't know if either of you have seen the movie Elf, where there's a part in Elf where Santa says to Will Ferrell, listen, when you see gum on the streets, that's not free candy. And he's never seen that, right? So he goes to the city, goes to New York, and what's the first thing he does? He starts pulling gum off of banisters and stuff like that, because he doesn't know that's, clearly the advice of Santa did not sink in, but it's the same, that's really striking me that I was not aware that there are adolescents, teenagers, young adults who have such a limited experience of the world because they weren't exposed. I mean, gosh, that really brings it into very stark relief for me. Just about the importance of...
Well, everything. I mean, we both are college professors, and we're seeing students come who no longer seem to have passion or creativity or that out-of-that-box thinking. They're just very stifled, and they just sit there waiting for instruction. And it's like, you can go ahead. What are you going to do? And it's almost like they're frozen because they haven't had opportunities to have that freedom and that creativity. And this is the generation, I don't know about you, but I want people who are going to solve some of our problems that we have with the environment or illnesses. And they have to be able to test their theories and ideas and hypotheses and come up with different things. It reminds me too when we do workshops about STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk to participants about is there's a company in Southern California called JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Okay, I've heard of that.
And yeah, several years back, they had a lot of engineers who retired, and so they started replacing them with the best and the brightest engineers coming from really prestigious universities, and they were not working out, and they couldn't figure out why. So they did a research study, and what they discovered is that they had not tinkered as children.
Wow.
So they didn't have that ability to think out of the box and do the brainstorming and divergent thinking. You could give them a computation and they could solve it perfectly without any problem, but they didn't have that internal intrinsic motivation to just be able to tinker and problem solve.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's also really interesting is that we're beginning to see the first generation of children who never played.
Yeah, that's a scary... Just saying that is that's a scary thing to say. A generation of children who've never played.
No, because everything is so organized for them that they don't know the meaning of play, and they cannot connect with it. So it's it's kind of a concern.
Yeah, and I have so many. Gosh, I have at least two avenues I really want to try and pursue. One is, have either of you ever heard of, or maybe you were involved in even, the crisis in the kindergarten? That huge. For me, it felt like a really sweeping study, but I actually think it was not. It was done by people at a couple of different teaching schools, and it was on either coast. And the National Association for the Education of Young Children, like their entire board basically said, please world know about this study. And what the study found was that when they studied kindergarten children, they discovered that the kindergarten children at the time, so this is probably a decade or so ago now, didn't have any unstructured time. They went from structured activity to gym, to structured activity to lining up for lunch, to structured activity of sitting down at lunch, to there was no time for play, no recess, no free play. And at the time they were saying, oh my gosh, this is incredibly scary. Like, what are we going to end up with here? And I'm wondering, it seems like you both are kind of reporting that what we're ending up with is children who have never played.
I think we get to see them as they're older because, teaching college, they start coming to us. Mm-hmm. And I had one particular young man who could not understand anything about being creative because he had never had the opportunity to engage himself in the arts or just manipulating free materials or even play. And I kept asking him, what is your memory of play? He says, I don't even know what that means.
Wow.
And that was a big eye-opener to me because we are dealing with the young, what I would say these are the young people that are the product of the No Child Left Behind Act.
Yes, that act came into play just as I was leaving graduate school and just as I started having my children. It was I worked in a public preschool program or semi-public until I left in 2000 to go and have my sons. And I was starting to hear about the negative effects of it as I left, and this is like, gosh, this is like a big. I've got goosebumps. I mean, I did not realize that it had extended this far. And so, but I do have another question. This is the other avenue I was thinking about, which is, do you notice, or is there any research that's been done on, is this a specific sort of class of people? Is it different socioeconomic levels of people, or different, is there any, have you noticed any, or do you have any ideas on that subject? Is like, do poorer kids know how to play more than less poor kids? Or anything?
No, it's interesting, and I'll just give you my anecdotal observation.
Yeah.
For me, I have taught in different socioeconomic venues, and parents of upper class seem to be fine with play. They seem to be comfortable that their children, they trust their children, they know they're going to have lots of time for learning, and they seem to be more relaxed, at least the parents that I've worked with. And parents in the lower class seem to be okay with their children playing. The ones that I see more are the ones that are in the middle, that they want their children to do better or strive better or get that better score, to go to that better college. Or so for me personally, I've seen a lot more pushing kind of in that arena. I don't know, what's your experience been, Miriam?
I think I would agree with you, Lisa. The one thing that we keep hearing all the time, and I personally find it a little disconcerting, is that we keep saying that children in lower socioeconomic areas are not coming prepared. And so they're not coming prepared to college. Academics. Okay. So we're pushing it down more and more. And what we're not realizing is that high level of academics that we're trying to impose in young children is not helping them at all.
Again, another
is hurting.
A breathtaking statement. I mean, gosh, because we know that parents are doing the things that they think are going to help their child succeed. I mean, they don't set out to hurt their kids, but that, I mean, that really, what a breathtaking, gosh, I feel like I'm going to need to talk to you both again just about that. So I guess just continuing on this line a little bit, playing devil's advocate, which, I mean, we've really gone over this, but it's still blowing my mind. So I'm going to ask this next question, even though perhaps you've already answered it. But some people think it's better for kids to learn to sit at a desk and learn to read and write as early as possible, no matter what the kids themselves think of that idea. And Lisa and Miriam, what might you say to parents who have that idea?
Stop it. I don't know, just like immediately. It is so detrimental. Children instinctively, intrinsically know what to do. They just know how to be curious and how to play and have fun and how to learn. They are scientists and investigators, and we need to provide rich environments with lots of open-ended materials, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, throughout later on. But oh my goodness, it actually is doing more harm for the children. It's going to affect their social skills, their emotional skills, their intellectual skills. There's just so much resource out there. We have so much evidence. All of the work of Alison Goplik, who's from Berkeley, the whole scientist in the crib, and the neurons to neighborhood, all of that research that's come out. You look at Doug Clemens, I mean, everybody, Susan Newman, I mean, just everybody out there 100% supports children learning through play. You have the work of Stuart Brown, who's done a lot of work on play and is a play advocate. Yes.
Wow.
And it actually, if you look, children who don't play are more depressed. They are more isolated. They have harder time connecting with people and establishing relationships. It's just everything happens through play. And we often talk about this in our workshops too, which is from Lillian Katz, who's a professor emeritus at Urbana-Champaign in Illinois, but there's a difference between intellectual learning and academic learning. And academic learning is often what parents think of when they look back at their own schooling or for their own children. But the academic learning is the memorizing and the rotation, the rote memory learning. We call it drill and kill.
Yeah.
But that's where you're just repeating things over and over again, or circle everything. That's the number 3. And that is not how learning happens. Learning happens in a very holistic way, which is much more on the intellectual side of the house. So the intellectual side of the house is hypothesizing and predicting and critical thinking and problem solving and reflection. And all of those academic things on that academic side of the house will happen within the context of the intellectual learning.
Wow.
But the reverse is not true.
Yes.
If I only do the academic learning, a child is never going to learn to problem solve or do critical thinking or be reflective. They're only going to learn to memorize facts. Mm-hmm. And that's the scary part. And so when you're talking about someone just sitting at a desk and doing worksheets, and that's the academic side of the house. So you are robbing them of that opportunity for their brain to grow and to develop and to learn all of those important intellectual skills, which are really life skills.
Yeah. So play produces or enhances, I suppose produces really intellectual learning. Can we say that?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's interesting too, because we are just conducting some research on the use of open-ended materials, or what we call loose parts, which is a term coined by architect Simon Nicholson in 1971.
Oh, I wondered where that came from.
Yeah, it was coined by an architect, which is also very interesting.
Yes.
And what we have found through the preliminary findings of this research is that symbolic representation or symbolic thinking is skyrocketing. So children as young as, what do you say, Lisa, 8 months old, are beginning to use different objects to symbolically represent other objects that they may have observed in their environment.
Wow.
So that you're beginning to see a growth in their cognition.
Yeah.
And a growth in their problem-solving skills at a very, very young age.
Wow.
And the other exciting part that is part of this research is that we're beginning to see how teachers' dispositions are changing, and they're more engaged in actual play and actually setting environments that are rich for play for young children.
Oh, wonderful. So the opposite of drill and kill.
Correct.
For the littles. I really want to dig more into the idea of loose parts itself, and also I want to dig into the idea of kids making choices for themselves, kind of independent play. But first, I am going to bring a word from our sponsor. So if you guys don't mind hanging back for just a quick minute and thinking on kids and choice, and I will read this word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by the Ninja Parenting Community. Every day, kids throw curveballs that really challenge us parents. If you're struggling to handle your child's negative behavior, advocate for your child whether because of bullying or discipline problems or issues in school, bring the levels of peace and sanity up in your home, then the Ninja Parenting Community is the place for you. It's where I help parents just like you discuss and solve these problems through parent coaching calls, through training courses and other resources, online resources, and through conversation in our forums. So go to WeTurnedOutOK.com or click the link in the show notes to find out more. And now back to the show. Thank you guys for letting me do that. So kids and choice. And actually, for me, it goes hand in hand with loose parts, because I first learned of loose parts. I don't know if you guys knew this. About, a year and a half ago now, I happened to read an article in a local little paper here on the East Coast. And it was about a woman named Tanya Trainer, who runs 3 nursery schools in Westboro, Massachusetts, and she incorporated the loose parts philosophy. They needed to replace their playground equipment, and she was like, you know what? We don't have the money to replace it with these same big kind of structures, and I'm not sure that I love what the big structures do anyway. We get fighting while kids are waiting in line for the slide, and when you only have one of something, there's a lot more opportunity for arguing, and especially something like that where there's only one way to use it. You either go up the slide or down the slide. That's it. And so she sort of looked around and she found your philosophy. I'm not sure if she found your book at that point or if she actually spoke to you or whatever, but she started saying to the children, what sounds interesting to put out on the playground? And they ended up coming up with things like bricks and tubes that you could run water through. And they had this, I actually got to interview Tanya in the kids' playground, and there was this rowboat, this plastic boat that was sitting, in the playground area. And Tanya said at first the kids would use it. They would get in and they would play mariner type stuff. They'd pretend they were sailing somewhere or whatever. And then it started to become a really interesting balancing tool for them. So this is just one example. While I was there, I could see the kids, they came out to play. So I could see, 4 or 5 of them would get into the rocking the boat and they would just rock it back and forth and play with the balance of it. And, they're lining up bricks and they're finding leaves and sticks and rocks and just all these wonderful outdoor things. And it was so cool to see the loose parts philosophy in action. And then when in our conversation, Tanya said to me, well, the children help choose these things. We never put anything out here without asking them what they think about that. And I'm wondering, does that come up for you guys? Did kids help you formulate the loose parts philosophy that you came up with?
Oh, absolutely. Everything is based upon them. That's the foundation. I was just smiling while you were talking because you're such a good storyteller, and I had this visual image of the playground and of the children being captivated, and just that everything was so magnetic there. So I was thinking about that, and I bet you still saw some arguments and disagreement, but probably a lot more collaboration and cooperation happening.
Yeah.
The standard play yard is, trying to adhere to the rules and stop that and get down from there. And
yes,
it's like, well, when they don't have anything to do, of course they're going to
get in trouble.
What do you expect them to do on an asphalt playground where they can only ride a bicycle around a loop 2 times and then they have to get off and give it to someone else? But choice is certainly part of it comes just from our experience and wisdom as moms and as professors, and just knowing what children love and things that are more open-ended that don't have a purpose. You mentioned the bricks or rocks or driftwood or sea glass or
all of those
boxes.
things. Yeah.
The list is endless, and we observe children and we really watch them and we look for what they're fascinated, what they're interested in. And I'm not sure where I read this. This isn't my idea, but if you start observing for the verb, the action that children are doing, and not the noun, that you will start to find their interests. So, for example, they're not really interested in a ball per se, but they're interested in the trajectory of the ball or throwing the ball or the rolling, so what the ball can actually do.
Yeah.
And so we watch children and we see if we'll give you an example. We had a little guy named Arnie who was very good at throwing.
Very good.
And his teacher was like, I just can't stop him. I don't know what to do. He's going to hurt another child, or be the teacher. Mm-hmm. And we said, Arnie has an interest in trajectory. Mm-hmm. And she says, what? And we're like, he's fascinated with the arch of things and the force of things, and how can he throw it from up high or from down low or up close. And so what we need to do is think of what kinds of materials can we put in the environment to support Arnie's interest. And these were toddlers. He was about 2, and they had a play loft. Now, just visualize a play loft in a toddler room is only, 18 inches or 24 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
And we put a basket of very soft items up there of yarn balls and wool felted balls and hair scrunchies and bath loofahs and all kinds of things. And just set the basket up there, didn't say anything. And Arnie came into the classroom. He raced up the stairs of the loft, and he just started tossing all of those items over. And it was what his body needed to do. It was a response to it. The neat thing is there was a little girl, and it was her first week at the program, and she stood at the base of the loft with her arms extended as if she was making a basketball hoop. And
cool.
Arnie started throwing them through there. And often we'll say to a child, well, what do you need? Do you want to share the story of Michael and the swing?
Oh, yes. Again, we're very fortunate to have been mentored by the boss, and we're very close now to Michael Lehman, who's running the program. Mm-hmm. So he always shares stories with us, and there was this one little guy who there were no more swings because everybody was using them, so he wanted a swing. And Michael said, what do you need? And the little guy says, I need rope. So they brought him the rope. What else do you need? And he went and got a little, like a little sawhorse that they have in the playground. And he figured out how to tie the rope onto the sawhorse so that they could take it up to the beam. And this is just through questioning. So what do we do with the rope now? How do we put it together? Mm-hmm. So this little guy created his own swing. And he used it.
I love that.
So that begins to show you that they do know what they want. Mm-hmm. They also very capable of finding solutions to solve their needs.
Yeah.
Or to meet their needs. And it is up to us adults to take the time to question and ask them, what else do you need?
And that brings me back to the idea of conflicts, right? There were reduced conflicts on Tanya Trainer's playground, Miss Tanya's nursery school's playgrounds, but there were still some conflicts, and that's important too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Children need to negotiate, and they need to be able to state their own perspective and to listen to other children's perspectives and to compromise sometimes, and that's part of life.
To listen to different points of view, and I think this is something that was introduced early on by Jean Piaget, where he talked that through discourse, through arguments, is where children enter that learning space where they can begin to acquire more cognitive information, which is very important.
Yeah, and that is
theory of mind.
Yeah, you're speaking my language with talking about Jean Piaget and some of these other early childhood kind of luminaries that you've been speaking about. It's so wonderful to be back in this world. When I think about loose parts, and I think about one of the things that you had mentioned, I've read this in I think it was the publishers of your book kind of published a little interview with you guys, and you shared that friends and colleagues would bring loose parts to you, and they'd be like, check out what I found. Did that really happen?
Oh, it's still happening.
Love that.
You know what? I want to share this because I thought this was fascinating. We were doing some photography at Folsom Lake College where I teach, and we were doing some outside photography, and people would walk by. It would be faculty, it would be classified staff, it would be a student, and they would engage in conversation with us, and they would be curious, like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Oh, my goodness. That's what I did as a child. Right. And they all had a story to share with us. There's like this connectedness that happens. Our students get excited and like, oh, you're not going to believe what I found. Come and take a look at this. Neighbors drop things off on my doorstep.
You get them in the mail.
I get them in the mail. A year ago, I received a huge package from Colorado from my mom and dad, and I opened it up, and it was a box full of pine cones. And I said, we do have pine cones in California. And they said, yes, Lisa, but they're not Colorado pine cones. And I have a neighbor who belongs to several wine clubs, and he saves me when he gets a shipment. It comes in this protective cardboard flat that is particularly good for construction and building. And so I'll open my door and there'll be a pile of those.
Oh, that's awesome. And then do you get to use those? You get to bring those things into your. Do you have like a learning, like a child lab or something like that? For listeners, when I went to UConn, I went to the University of Connecticut, and the place where teachers went to learn how to teach young children in kindergarten or in preschool or in an infant room or a toddler room was called the UConn Child Labs. It's probably not called that anymore, but because it always seemed to be kind of an odd name. But do you have a place like that?
We have at Casumnes, we still have a child development center.
Mm-hmm. And at Folsom Lake College, I won't get political, we closed our child development center. And we now have what we call a demonstration classroom. Mm-hmm. And so it's an environment that's set up that has everything except for children. And so we take students in there regularly to do demonstrations. And then Miriam and I are doing a little on-the-side consulting, which is...
It's not little.
You're right, it is big. Which is actually a fascinating story. I don't know if we have time to tell you that or not, but we were out. I'll give you the abridged version, which is we were asked by the executive director of Head Start in our area if we would be willing to do 3 loose parts demonstration classrooms, one for preschool, one for infants and toddlers, and one in a family child care environment. And so we did that 2 years ago. We took out probably 95% of all their toys and we put loose parts in them. And this was through mentoring and coaching with the teachers. Mm-hmm. It was through family engagement, and the parents were very active. It was through community engagement too. And we've transformed their environment. So they are all loose parts.
Wow.
And it has had such an impact on children's learning and development, on the teacher dispositions. And we finished that contract and we were asked to do another 3 programs. Mm-hmm. So we're doing 3 more programs, preschool, infant, toddler, and family child care in another county.
Oh, wonderful.
Now. But the transformation is unbelievable. So all the loose parts that end up on our doorsteps or that we find end up in the environments where we're doing things.
So that sounds wonderful. I mean, I just want to say how sorry I am for the loss of the Child Development Center at Folsom Lake, because I'm sure that it was a wonderful place, and it must hurt, but at least, you know, I can hear in your voices that it's fun for you to bring these things out to other kids in other places, and to know that they'll get the benefit of that. So that's
absolutely,
that's good. So I'm thinking about the parents listening to this conversation, and I'm thinking about them because I have a feeling that one thing that's going through their minds is as positive and exciting and thrilling as all this sounds, and you're describing like really good changes that happen, and not just in the kids, but you've said a couple of times that the teachers and the adults really get a lot out of this as well. But what if there are moms and dads of young children who are listening right now, and what they're thinking is, oh, great, one more thing to try and build into my kid's life? Will bringing a loose parts philosophy into their homes complicate their lives? And do you feel why? I guess I know you will feel that it's worth making this change, but why is it worth making that change?
I think if anything, it's going to make them distress them.
It'll de-stress them.
Materials that are so readily available. I mean, you have them at home. I have never met a child that doesn't open the kitchen cupboard and takes all the Tupperware out to start playing with them.
Yeah. Or the soap bubbles in the sink, or.
Yes, or in the bathtub. But we have when we do a family engagement or family conversations or trainings, what we get back from the parents is a sigh of relief that they don't need to go spend money on expensive toys to get the openness of thinking that children have when they play with loose parts. So this is not something that you mark up part of your schedule. I mean, if I was going to say anything to parents, is deconstruct your schedule and let them just do loose part play.
Yeah.
Because they're going to gain every single skill, knowledge, and disposition that they're going to need when they go to school.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, the idea of the little boy, I think it was Arnie, who was throwing yarn balls. Like, there are so many opportunities for little kids to get into trouble at home. And if we can shape their environments so that there's nothing they can get in trouble with, everything is okay. Like, if they pull out the Tupperware, that's fine. That's what they're into stacking right now. And that's,
Right.
That's a cool thing. And then you don't have to get expensive toys to stack. You can just open up the Tupperware drawer and let them do that. Let them do their thing.
I think it's okay if I share that we do have a contract to do loose parts for families,
For family engagement.
Oh,
And-
no way. Like a book?
A book, right.
Oh,
And
how
so
thrilling.
in 2018, I think.
We don't know.
When was, I don't know.
I think it's 2018. We are just constantly writing, so we keep looking at each other and saying, one more.
Yeah. Another one. Well, I've got
That should be really neat for all of your listeners because it will have loose parts that are particularly good to have in your kitchen, to have in your bathroom for a rainy, stormy day.
Oh, I love it.
If you're going to go on a road trip, what should you take with you? And
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is delightful. I can't wait for that. I hope you'll both come back on the show when the book is out and we can have another good talk about it.
We would love to, and we have another one coming out in November this year.
Oh, yeah. What's that one?
That's Loose Parts, Inspiring Culturally Sustainable Environments.
Oh, I love it. I'm putting it on. I'm going to write down right now. Inspiring culturally
Sustainable Environments.
Culturally sustainable environments. And again, that will perhaps you guys could become a regular thing here on We Turned Out Okay, because you just have so many good ideas that my listeners really, really need to hear about, that all you out there in listener land need to know. And I hate to do it, but I have to, we have got to cut this conversation off right here because you have 4 minutes left before you ladies need to be out doing something else. So I want to say thank you so much, Miriam and Lisa, to both of you for coming on the show today and for sharing your enthusiasm and your knowledge with everybody out here who really needs to hear about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And listeners, you can get in touch with Lisa and Miriam by they have a website called reflective-perspectives.com. If that feels like it's going to be crazy for you to remember, I will link to it in the show notes. No worries. And also, I believe it is Miriam who has the Twitter handle @reflectiveplay on Twitter. Is that right? Am I right about that?
That is correct.
Yes. Okay, cool. So if you have questions for them, direct them to those two places. If you want to get in touch with me, you can connect with me. I'm @StoneAgeTechie on Twitter. I'm @WeTurnedOutOK on Instagram. And you can always go through good old-fashioned email to Karen@WeTurnedOutOK.com or WeTurnedOutOK.com/contact. I want to say thank you so much for listening today. If you feel like people in your world will get some value out of this show, please share it, because that's how we that's how we get into more people's ears who really need to hear what we have to say over here. So, and finally, I have a special thanks to our producer, the 19-time winner of the Husband of the Year Award, Benjamin Culp. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.